Hey everyone, welcome back to the Joel Bine Show. Grateful for you being here. I've been marinating on the idea of psychological masks lately and how that plays out in so many aspects of the culture and our personal lives and our professional lives, and kind of want to free associate on this topic. I've thought about this for a long time. I remember I used to read this blogger back when I was like 19, 20, 21 for a few years there. Sort of a different fringe left anarchist type, really activated my thinking in a lot of ways. But I remember he was first talking about this idea of the professional mask, actually the psychological mask rather. So a personal psychological mask. We'll get to the professional mask thing in a minute. But he was talking about in the realm of dating and romantic relationships, and how it's so often the standard advice is be yourself, right? But then so many people will say, well, or at least they will act in such a way that isn't necessarily being themselves. And there's a whole dance that often plays out in the culture in that domain around not revealing too much too soon type of thing when it comes to getting to know somebody that could become an intimate partner and so forth. And so I remember him talking about this idea of being yourself in relationships as well as in all types of relationships. And he said, the thing about that is if you start being yourself, it's probably going to be harder. It's probably going to be harder to be successful at dating, so to speak, or successful at making friends. Like, it might be harder to connect with a high volume of dates or friends. In other words, people might reject you. It might actually be the case that people will reject you more easily. And yet he also said, but then if you are being yourself, the people who actually like it and appreciate it, they're going to stick around. And you're going to have the depth and the meaning and the substance in those relationships. And so I just remember, and then he started talking about, in this blog, he was talking about this idea of masks, the psychological mask, and how, like, so often we just put on that front, that facade, that veer, that veil. Veer, is that the right word there? Veil is definitely an appropriate word there. Veer, I'm not sure where that came from. Might be a word. I'm still gonna take off my mask of perfectionism in this podcast, y'all. So then you'll be more likely to connect with me, because look, I'm showing you my imperfections here. No, seriously though, Brene Brown wrote a whole book, The Gift of Imperfection, about that vulnerability piece and the allowing yourself to be seen, which can require courage. But yeah, this idea of the psychological masks, I remember first reading that on that blog, and I was like, 22, 23. I just remember being floored, because this was 2011 or something. I was not, there wasn't as much information about, I don't know, there wasn't as much like self-help stuff out there. I think now we're just inundated with with memes and aphorisms around this type of thing. But back then, I think there was just less material out there, / I was much younger. So it was a new thing it was a very new concept for me. And I just remember being blown away. I just remember being, wow, that's me. I do that a lot. I wear psychological masks a lot. And that was before I had barely just begun to scratch the surface of any personal development. And any sort of deeper way of accessing the subconscious that really hadn't happened yet. I was just that in that period of life was more just becoming aware, meaning becoming consciously incompetent, so to speak, of my self-integration path, like becoming conscious of the stuff. But I didn't like the subconscious layers, but I didn't really start digging into those layers until a couple years after that. But anyhow, the idea of the psychological mask really stuck with me and kind of blew my mind. And I think that being myself, you could say that for anybody. It could be a universal statement that like that's one of the main purposes of life, perhaps. The main intentions of life is to be yourself. That sounds very cliche, but I know for me, my narrative, the way I see myself, my narrative, my story is my arc has been so much tied to that theme of like, am I going to reveal myself? I had this I hatched this pithy saying a few years ago, which was my 20s was about finding myself. And actually, it was my 20s were about knowing myself. And my 30s have been about being myself. So the idea of being myself was didn't even seem like when I read that blog, I was like, I wasn't sure how I would even do that. Like not wear a mask. Like and looking back, I can see how much of that, my wall, my guard, was so normalized in that period of my life and so forth. And there was all tied to childhood experience and so much tied to safety and different needs, different belief structures, right? That I've since liberated. And so it's so much more easeful for me to share. I've also just put myself in more healthy environments where there's more and more people who value authenticity and want me to be myself. So there's a lot of different variables with it, but my 20s were just trying to get to know who I am and then access those layers. And then my 30s, I'm in my late 30s now. My 30s have been definitely very fruitful with being able to open up and share and let go of the psychological masks and just reveal. And I do believe Brene Brown is correct when she talks about like that true connection only happens when you reveal. It's through vulnerability that we create true connection. And so she had a line in that book I mentioned, Gift of Imperfections, that stuck with me, which was lean into the discomfort. Like even when you clear beliefs, like I think there's always going to be a vulnerability. The beliefs. Just as a quick aside about beliefs, like because I'm always talking about beliefs. I think the beliefs create the wall. There's the fears, there's beliefs that like it's not safe to express myself and things like that are creating all this excessive wall. And so it's that much harder. Like the vulnerability is completely magnified because there's assumptions about safety and so forth. And so that wall, that protective mechanism kicks in. But I think even when you fully heal, I don't know, I'm just kind of playing with thoughts right now, but I think the most integrated person that's fully healed, or whatever you want to say, I think there's still like a discomfort to some degree of being vulnerable, or like being sharing something where you don't know how it's going to land, you know? Susan Campbell, in her book Getting Real, she talks about, which is a very good book. It's a very practical book, and she talks about the difference between relating and controlling. And relating is expressing what's on your mind and your heart, and not knowing where that's going to lead, how that person's going to respond. But that's the essence of that vulnerability, that authentic expression. Versus controlling is putting up that guard and that mask, and then you have that predictability and that safety potentially. But how much are you squeezing away and cutting off the authenticity, the ability to be seen, to have true intimacy and connection and openness? And so that's the world that I want to see. I think being yourself doesn't have to be this big fight. And I believe, and I mean the word belief in the sense of something that's temporal, but it's something that is not an absolute statement, but I believe that at the moment, in this sort of period of human evolution, that it is difficult for a lot of people, and it's been difficult for me to be myself. Even now, I feel vulnerable saying that right now, because I'm like, I need to be able to come across like I've figured it all out by now. It's like, no, actually, I haven't fully figured it all out. I haven't fully healed everything and so forth. But again, it's like so much more authenticity and vulnerability and expression and visibility for me at this stage of life compared to 15 years ago. But I'm going to pull up that quote by Cummings, which I've dubbed the GOAT quote, because it's really resonated with me, and I want to comment on it in a minute, but let me read it to you. To be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best day and night to make you like everybody else means to fight the hardest battle which any human being can fight and never stop fighting. How does that land? I mean, the idea that the world is doing its best day and night to make you like everybody else. Where's the truth in that quote, right? Where's truth in that quote? It doesn't mean that it's an absolute truth. But if you feel into that, you can sense the truth in that. So I don't believe it has to be that way, but I believe it is as I speak. For most people, that is a frequent experience, given the culture. And my desire is to build the world of openness and wholeness. That doesn't mean that we don't ever have a utility with protecting ourselves, or there's not a mandate or a necessity to always be vulnerable, right? That's a misinterpretation of the essence, of the value of that. We don't want to fall into forced vulnerability, or like a world of openness doesn't have to mean we say everything, we're fully transparent about everything. It's that we've let go of and liberated and integrated the fear. And so it becomes an empowered experience, not a conditioned response experience, Not we're choosing in any given moment how transparent or open we are based on the context, based on what feels organic, what is our desired level of authenticity and transparency, versus we have the guard come up over our hearts because of stories and layers that are obsolete from decades ago, because of our family systems where we were implicitly or explicitly told that we're not to be seen and heard. Not to be seen and heard. Those are forbidden needs. We'll make sure you get some needs met, perhaps. We'll give you shelter. We'll give you some needs. We'll give you food, perhaps. We'll give you shelter. We'll give you a degree of freedom. We'll give you a degree of fun, perhaps. Everyone's childhood's different. But it's very universal at the moment. At the moment, it's very universal that people didn't have the full experience of a flourishing childhood, a full experience of all our needs being met in totality and in abundance. So what does it mean even to be yourself, right? That's a big question, of course. That's why I say, my 20s were about knowing myself, and my 30s been about being myself and applying what I learned. So there's a self-knowledge quest that requires introspection, invites us to introspect, perhaps. But what I'm interested in is, can we dissolve the fear, open up to lead from our hearts more? That's what's been alive for me, I realized. I think even in this podcast, 71 episodes in now, I think this podcast, I've had two other podcasts in the past, but this perhaps is my most authentic and open one. I mean, if you've been here the whole time, you've heard a lot of different depths of who I am, I would say. And so I feel way the most whole ever on this podcast. And I'm like, wait, how much have I gotten actually in moments? And this isn't even I'm not even assessing myself in a way that's saying it's a problem. It's just like an observation, where how much of the podcast have I been more in the mind than in the heart? And I think that's it's fun. Again, there's no obligation one way or the other for how I do it for myself. This has always been about joy and aliveness for me, this podcast. But I've just been noticing an observation. I think I really do come alive when it comes to ideas, like just in the mind. I'm smiling right now because I just it's involuntary, because I just love the spiciness of it all, of bringing in philosophy and psychology and the conceptual and riffing on ideas, which I'm doing now too, but I'm also seeking to share a little bit more from my heart. But see, what I've noticed is that maybe a higher percentage of the time has been, let's riff on concepts and ideas, and it's fun. But it's really that humans connect the most, I think, to each other through story, through the heart. So I'm not even actually saying that I want to be more in my heart. I'm not even saying if I want that or not, because I'm not trying to force vulnerability on myself, but I'm noticing that observation. I think it actually has been a higher percentage of the time, or a significantly higher percentage of the time has been more about, let's talk about concepts. And then, I mean, like I'm talking about deep concepts, about like, new paradigms in parenting and education. They're like, it's like deep stuff, right? But even then, it's more like a conceptual thing often. And then, so it's not always either or, of course, left brain versus right brain. But, I think personal story hasn't, I have a 5-part podcast about my story with confronting my parents. And then I have another podcast, my story leaving the school system. All this is to say, not to make this just to make this about a meta podcast about the podcast, but I'm just genuinely reflecting on these ideas on this nature of the idea of creating connection in the world and getting seen and self-expression, and how vulnerability and courage and openness and relating versus controlling and seeking to express versus seeking to impress, which, if I'm being honest with myself, I've noticed that in my history as well, of the part of me that wants to impress, which I think goes back to deep childhood stuff where I was like, I didn't have the core security, attachment, love, safety to be myself. From deepest, earliest childhood, I figured out, like I intuited, I got the gist. This is this world that I'm living in now, that I was born into, and like, some of I just created all sorts of beliefs. I know that I did based on the belief work that I've done. Like, it's not safe to be myself, and like that belief took me a long time. Like, most of the beliefs we can clear in 15 minutes, but that one was like the rare one that was like super stubborn. And I could even that particular one, I would conjecture might be something. This the sidebar, but like could be something deeper than beliefs. It could be something ancestral for those who have like familiarized themselves at all with potential epigenetics and ancestral trauma. But I don't even know. That's just hypothesis. But like, this has been such a theme for my story, and so I came into the world and I put that guard up right away. I think, like by age 2. Yeah, it feels true. I just felt that in my heart. Like, when I said that, I just felt like a poignancy. So like, there's a somberness, like by age 2, I just like, that's what happened. As early as I can remember, I put the wall up, trauma response, seeking safety. And I didn't get seen. I didn't get seen. It's not even, I'm not even seeking to imply like someone was at fault for that, which, I mean, you could, like, I could talk about that, but I'm not even seeking to go there right now. I'm just seeking to say what I experienced. My need to be seen didn't get met. And I don't even, I mean, not to keep being tangential here, but I actually believe at this point, and I haven't talked about my relationship with my mom recently, but since that 5-part series from a couple years ago, but I won't get into that right now. But I actually recently concluded that I don't think my parents ever actually have seen me. My dad's not alive anymore, but I don't think they've ever actually fully seen me. again, it's not to, it's not to say that it's an either or thing. You're either seen or not seen, but that full depth of your true self is seen, which I believe happens when the parent is expressing delight and curiosity, where the child expresses the authentic self and the parent responds and attunes and mirrors and reflects and celebrates, right? It's like, ooh, wow, your authentic self, share more. I'm delighting in that. And it nourishes the authentic self. And the curiosity piece is like, I want to know more about, like, you say something and you express an idea. And then it's like, hey, tell me more about that. I'm curious what you mean by that. And it's like, I want to delight and take interest in your soul, your being, your personality, and your desires, your preferences, and your mind, right? So like ideas, my mind, it makes me come alive to share this. But yeah, I mean, it's, my mom's never listened to this podcast. I'm not seeking to like say anything about that as a judgment. It's just, that's where I'm at right now. I've realized that I don't think I've actually ever been seen by my parents. And I say all this, it's actually not really, didn't intend to record this podcast about too much of my story, but I guess that's kind of what I'm leaning into as we unfold here, because of the idea of like psychological masks. I'm like, maybe I want to share more of this story for the audience, because I want to live this, you know? Maybe it's more valuable, you know, but it feels there's a slight vulnerability in there. But like, to bring home the thread of the idea, this idea, meandering idea thread here, is that I want to create the world of openness where we're free to express, not just impress. That was the other little loose end there, is that I because by age 2, I had intuited or whatever that it wasn't a place to be myself. But of course, we still have the need to be seen. So I created strategies to try to get the need to be seen met. And so I would do certain strategies like showing off. I mean, it started off as early as just whenever simple things like, if you look at early pictures of me, I'm smiling with this like super big smile that's super enthusiastic and sort of manufactured. I mean, it's cute, it's funny, but it's also, my hypothesis is that I was trying to be project extra energy so that people would see me. Like, please look at me, please see me. That was, I think, underneath that strategy. It's this very subtle thing to like analyze that from, especially something that started at such a young age. But I think that's what happened. And I've seen that in different areas of my life over the years, of like having this part of me that I want people to think I'm impressive, right? Look at this status, or look how cool X, Y, and Z is. Even like, oh, look how cool my podcast is, because I like have cool titles, or like I'm minimalist, and like, oh, my podcast intro music, I love that. There's like that little side of me, and maybe everyone has that. People might call that ego or something, which I've never really been a fan of that word, but I think the healthy version is really to integrate that, and that doesn't matter, that stuff. It's not to judge that part of me, but expressive versus impressive. Are you expressing your heart, or are you seeking to look good? So that can come about in all sorts of ways. So it happened. I was going to say we're going to talk about the professional masks, and I think it plays out there too. And that's where I want to see this integrate as well, in the paradigm shift towards a teal consciousness, the wholeness and openness. And I'm reading the book Reinventing Organizations by Frederick Laloux, and that's based on this integral theory and the teal stages of consciousness. And he profiles about a dozen businesses that he's researched that are operating in a different paradigm of business structure and organization that are based on self-management, wholeness, and shared evolutionary purpose, as opposed to the traditional orange and green consciousness structures, orange being the most common in the business world, of sort of hierarchy, top-down, performance-based, and incentives and performance pay, and do the job. Cog in a wheel stuff. This mindset around execution and achievement. And with that comes the professional mask. So the professional mask is not about sharing your feelings at work, in the business context. There's a baked-in assumption in this culture that you just leave that for your personal life, and you have professional life and personal life. And it's professional life, it's kind of about looking good. Are you doing the tasks well? Are you executing? It's this masculine left brain achievement side, but it's not an integrative, holistic experience. And so the teal organizations are starting to break into a new paradigm, and it's allowing for wholeness. And so I could do a whole podcast series on that book alone, but I just want to invite that as well, to become aware of the water in which we swim, because this is everywhere. It's everywhere it's everywhere from going to the grocery store and people making small talk, and someone says, "How are you?" And what do you say? You say, I'm good, I'm fine. That's the most standard programmed response. Now, there could be some utility in that game, in that small talk, but like, the reality is people don't feel comfortable with you giving a raw answer to that. Because we don't live in that world of wholeness and openness right now, do we? Like, as a culture, like, ubiquitously, it's not there at the moment. I think we can create it. I think we can create it. It's kind of hard to imagine, isn't it? But for that level of like openness can be much more and more safe. We can just be parasympathetic everywhere we go. It's not just like in the smallest intimate moments with our closest loved ones. Yes, there's degrees of transparency and authenticity and vulnerability, as I've said. But like this whole thing where like you just control the conversation through a predictable answer that closes your heart. So this is happening in our daily lives, and then like in the business context, in the professional context, it's very normalized. So to be able to bring in the full self and allow different aspects of yourself to integrate in to our experience in creating value in the marketplace, I would love to just dissolve this dichotomy between personal and professional life. Again, it's not to say we have to dissolve all boundaries. It's just to say that we don't need to feel in this fear state where it's this fierce dichotomy where we put on the psychological mask in the workplace, and then we come home and then we switch. Like, just feeling free, and also letting go. A big part of that with the business context and professional context is letting go of the hierarchies. So that's a big part of the teal, is the self-management versus top-down management. And so when you have hierarchies, then it makes complete sense to not want to be your whole self. When it's about like adhering to the policies and so forth from your supervisor and so forth, the incentive structures of that are not conducive to wholeness. So we need to look at the holistic, we need to take a bird's eye view of all of this with the systematic elements of the cultures and contemplate the idea of providing trust and self-management and letting go of these hierarchies, which is a whole paradigm shift with that, which that book gets into. It's really about making life more wonderful, as Marshall Rosenberg would say. Can we contemplate a new vision for humanity that makes life more wonderful? Where instead of like, it's a big battle to be yourself, it's the most wonderful experience. It's to be celebrated. Just like that ideal parent is celebrating and taking interest in you from a young age. But that builds and blossoms through all facets of our world, in all domains, where we can be celebrated wherever we go for that authentic self. And it's celebrating like the flower in each of us. There's always beautiful flowers that blossom around this planet. And there's so much color, there's so much freshness. And they blossom without force, without willpower. It's this organic process of the flower blossoming and expressing its color. And can we allow that for each individual human to express his or her color, his or her light, his or her authenticity, and have this blossoming spontaneity in the world from that inner child energy, from the bottom up and inside out? That would be a beautiful world, huh? So I invite you to connect to that little child inside of you and perhaps just find a picture, either in your mind or literally find a picture of yourself from as young as age 3 or 2. Just imagine, just see yourself playing and smiling and feeling the uninhibited self-expression where there was no thought of, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? There was a sense of freedom. There's that deconditioned whole self, hopefully, at that age. Even if there was some conditioning already starting to happen, like it was for me, I mean, that spirit was very alive. That spirit was very alive of that uninhibited, original, individualistic, unique self. So in the spirit of Louise Hay, I invite you to say, I accept and celebrate my uniqueness. I accept and celebrate my uniqueness. And perhaps take that into the rest of your day today and your week and your month and your year and your life. Because that uniqueness is absolutely incredible and special and wonderful and beautiful. Thank you so much for listening.